Hello and welcome to this video in which I explain how to navigate the annotated texts. By the annotated texts I mean ones in which I've put up a text prepared a text in Sanskrit and Pali, done romanization, translation, sentence breakdown, notes and that kind of thing. Now, in these annotated texts I've used a certain number of abbreviations and conventions, and the purpose of this video is just to help you navigate through them and hopefully to get the maximum benefit from the annotated texts. So firstly, I will show you what I mean by an annotated text. Let me call it up and then share my screen with you. Here we are. I've just chosen this pretty much random example. This is from the Bodhicharyavatara, chapter 7. This is verse 4. So in the top box we have this verse in the Devanagari script, followed by the romanization in the standard form. This is the one most commonly used by Sanskritists and Paliists in the West, well, all over the world now. The next box, you'll see those same words of the romanization. Let's get there. So those same words, Kleshava, Gurika, Grata, and so on, followed by, for every word, followed by a certain rubric. Then you will see a straight English translation. That's the one that goes centered out by the trappers. Then the words of the original text repeated in the left-hand column, and there are points here that I'll deal with in a moment, and with an explanation, not just a translation, well, translation and explanation in the right-hand column, and certain additional notes in the last box. So firstly, let's have a look at the abbreviations that are used here. You will find those in a document which is marked Inflectional Abbreviations. At the moment it's Inflectional Abbreviations V2, that's version 2, which you will find on my Google Drive in the folder 00 Indexes, General Guides and Resources. And in the notes that I send out for those of you who are following particular things with me, like the Dhammapada in Pali and shortly the Bodhicharyavatara in Sanskrit. By the way, when I say shortly, I'm creating this video on the 14th of June 2021. When you have the notes for those, I'll give you links for where these things are, including the abbreviation sheet, the inflectional abbreviation sheet, so you can have it in front of you if you wish. So let's just look at the first rubric here, M1S. Then the next M1S. Now here is an F2S. Then you've got an I, and second line I, and then a 2SA space PRE. M6S, N2S, M1S. Right, what I'm going to do now, I will call up this document onto the screen. So let me pause to try and get this right. My apologies again, I'm just doing this without specialist training on my own home computer, and so it can get a little bit clunky. Okay, here we are, I hope. So we're looking at this box that you've seen before. Now, if you look at this document, the inflection markers used in my Sanskrit and Pali teaching materials, all of them are described, and if you want to find what M1S means, you look at the table of abbreviations for nominals. Nominals is nouns, numerals, pronouns, and adjectives. There you have it. M1S, you see it's masculine, nominative, singular. And for the sake of consistency, I'll always do it in that order. So whenever you see an inflectional abbreviation starting with the letter M or F or N, then you'll immediately know that it's going to be a nominal, and you look it up in this table. Now look at Janma Vaguram. Vaguram. Vagura is a feminine noun meaning a trap. This is the accusative, known by the Sanskrit and Pali grammarians as the Dvitiya Vibhakti or Dvitiya Vibhakti in Pali. So that's the second case. We call it the accusative case in Western grammar. So F2S, you'll see where I'm highlighting there, F2S. And by highlighting it, I've now succeeded in losing the other document. Sorry. Here we are. So F2S, where you see my cursor moving around, get a feminine, accusative, singular. Now look at this. In the second line, you have Janasi, you know. Janasi. You have 2 SA space PRE. So what does that mean? It's a second singular active. It's a verb. Second singular active in the present tense. In these notations, as I said, whenever you see a notation beginning with either M, F, or N, highlighting them here, M, F, or N, you know it's a nominal, and the M, F, and N stands for neuter. Whenever you see a notation beginning with a number, and those numbers are only 1, 2, and 3, you know that it's a verb. Look down now to the verbs. So the list is a little bit long for all the different moods and tense plus moods. The list is a bit long there. Most of them you'll actually not see in normal classical Sanskrit. A lot of these relate to Vedic. So don't worry too much. It's not as complicated as it looks. So look at, in this Janasi word, 2 SAPRE, that means that it is a second person, S for singular, A for active, so it's second singular active verb as opposed to a middle or a passive verb. So you in the singular, thou knowest, second singular active. And the PRE is present, so present tense. So that means it's a second singular active present tense verb. Now the purpose of all this is simply to save you the trouble of looking it up. You could look up Janasi in the grammar books and find out. The purpose of this is to save you a lot of that hassle, to enable you to devote your time and attention to where it's more usefully used, actually learning the words, learning the text, rather than going through a grammar book trying to find what it is. So let me just go through this sheet with you. So what the box is, the box with the romanization, the box with the notations, we've just been through that. Interclinables, words that do not vary in form. You can use decline, or a broader word is inflect. When grammarians talk about a word inflecting, they mean that it changes its form depending on what we've just been looking at. If it's a verb, whether it's I, we, you, he, she, it, they, whether it's an active, passive, or middle verb. and what the tense. So all these different endings in Sanskrit and Pali will indicate these different functions that you'll have. So from the root bhu, to be, bhavami, I am, bhavasi, you are, bhavati, they are, sorry, he, she, it is, bhavanti, anti, they are. So these different endings, ami, asi, anti, and so on, lots and lots of them, are called inflections, bending away. And the same with the nouns. Buddha is a vocative. That's the stem form and the vocative. Buddho in Sanskrit, in Pali Buddho, Sanskrit Buddha is the masculine singular. Buddhena, instrumental singular. Buddheshu in Pali Buddhesu, locative plural. So these o, ah, ena, esu. These are the inflections of the nominals. Some words are indeclinable. That means they don't change their form, like nominal nouns, nominals, and verbs do. I mean, they're very, very common, occurring the whole time. So, yedi, if, cha, but, sarvada, always, drishtva, having seen. A lot of these things just never change their form. So that's why they're called indeclinables, and they are marked with the letter I. You'll see where my cursor is. Sorry, the letter I here. 3 in a row here. Actually 4 in a row if you treat adya and api as 2 words. It's 4 in a row. Kim, adya, api now. 4 indeclinables in a row. Very common. Why do I say nominals instead of just nouns? That is because we distinguish in Western grammars between nouns, adjectives, numerals, and pronouns. And Sanskrit and Pali make the same distinction. The reason we lump them together under this word nominals is because when we are noting the inflectional category of it, like the M1S, M6S, F2S, these same notations will apply to nouns, adjectives, numerals, and pronouns, which is why it's convenient to lump them together in one. So, for example, you can have an F2S, a feminine accusative singular, for a noun, for an adjective, for a numeral, and for a pronoun. So that's the only reason. It's a matter of convenience. Now, certain nouns can be, and indeed pronouns as well, can be of more than one gender. Of course, the same applies when I say nouns and pronouns. All nominals, whether nouns, adjectives, numerals, or pronouns, more than one gender. Okay, the nouns can be of more than one gender, and the qualifiers can have the same form for more than one gender. Let's look in particular at the nouns. Those which are some nouns, particularly in Pali, where something that may be of a fixed gender, masculine or neuter in Sanskrit, can be either in Pali. So we'll note it, we'll note a nominal, particularly when it's a noun, no, not necessarily always, as being, if it can be either masculine or neuter, we will write, here you see where I'm highlighting, M/N. It means that noun can be masculine or neuter. The same applies to non-gendered pronouns. In the third person, he, she, it, Sanskrit and Pali, same as we do in English, make the distinction between masculine, feminine, neuter. Whereas the first person, I, we, and the second person, thou, you, they do not, neither Sanskrit nor Pali distinguishes. So if the speaker is male or female, they'll both refer to themselves as aham. And in we, the two of us, avam, for example, in Sanskrit, that doesn't distinguish between masculine and feminine. So that is the explanation of the either MFM slash, then followed by the alternative. Examples: mayi, locative of aham, mayi, in me, is marked as M/F/N7S. There we are. MFN means the aham or mayi. Aham can be of any gender. 7, seventh case, otherwise known as locative, and S for singular. Look at the next one. Trishnaya. Instrumental of the Trishna, Sanskrit here. Tanha in Pali. Trishnaya, thirst. You'll find this marked as F3S, feminine. Third case, instrumental, S for singular, and so on. There are a number of cases, very numerous cases, in Sanskrit and Pali, where a nominal will have the same form for different cases. One prime example is neuter nouns. Now, all neuter nouns are the same for the nominative and the accusative. You'll find by those of you who know Latin and Greek and the Slavonic languages, the same applies there. Masculines and feminines change from nominative to accusative, but neuters have both. So, for example, the nagaram. No, what example have we given here? Nagaram is a neuter. So if you just see nagaram in a text, so it may be nominative. Tatra nagaram, there is the city. Or nagaram gacchati, he goes to the city. That's the accusative. So tatra nagaram, nagaram is nominative. Nagaram gacchati, accusative. When we're doing the notations in a text, I put the case to reflect what function the word has in that position in that text. And we see an example in virya in an early part of chapter 7 here. If you look at verse 1, bhajed, see where I'm highlight, bhajed viryam, let him cultivate virya. So it's marked here, viryam, you'll see, is marked here as N2S. It's a neuter noun. This is the accusative, and it's singular. Now, the mere fact that it has the same form in the nominative, we ignore for these purposes, because here you're being told this is being used in the accusative position, because it's the direct object of the verb bhajed, bhajed with sandhi, bhajed viryam. Look down now to verse 2, kim viryam, exactly the same word, but this time it's in the nominative. And that's why I've noted it here as N1S, not N2S. So it's the first case, the nominative, simply because in this particular position it is a nominative. So there we are. Don't be thrown by that. So N2S, Y2 is also a 1. Yes, it is also a 1, but here in this verse it's in the accusative, just as here in verse 2 it's in the nominative. So I'll turn now to the verbs. Table of abbreviations for nominals. Now for the verbs. it's a common convention among linguists that this mathematical root symbol, we use that to describe or to indicate that what follows is a root. So this is how I do it. So what I'm just typing this in, I'll delete it in a moment. This boo here. So the way I've written it indicates that what follows, boo, is simply the root. It's not, as it were, an independent, freestanding word on its own. You'll never see that in a running text. You'll only see it in grammars where we have the conjugation of the verb boo, and then you'll have bhavami, bhavasi, bhavati, and so on. Let me just delete that now. Just as we have got a series of conventions for nominals, MFN, numbers 1 to 8, and then singular, dual, plural. By the way, for dual, the Sanskrit, Vedic and Sanskrit retain the dual, Pali does not. Save in a few crystallized hangovers, but it's virtually disappeared from Pali. You won't see it actively being used. So these are the conventions for nouns. Verbs, by the way, also have a dual, singular, dual, plural, in Sanskrit, but not in Pali. So note that the persons in Western grammars, we talk about, in verbs, we talk about the first person, the second person, the third person. Third person is the speaker, I or we. Second person, the person being spoken to, thou, you. Third person being spoken about. But when we say person, by the way, it doesn't necessarily mean a person, since we're human beings, anything. The third person can become anything or person, he, she, it, or they. Just note here that just as the Indian grammarians have their system of describing the cases from the first through to the seventh, and in the case of some Pali grammarians, the vocative is the eighth. The Sanskrit doesn't describe that as a separate case. They also have their own system of numbering for the persons, but slightly inconveniently, we just have to learn to live with it. That where we talk about the first, second, and third person, Sanskrit and Pali grammarians reverse that order. So when a Sanskrit grammarian is talking about the first person, he's talking about he, she, it, or they. And when talking about the third person, that means I, we. And the second, of course, is the second in both the Western notation and the Sanskrit grammarians. So here, in common with another very good system which I've actually borrowed this from, which you will learn about in due course, hopefully, I've used the Western notations first that we're used to, first person, speaking in the first person, meaning I, and so on. So here, under these examples, you see examples of marking for verbs. So bhavati, 3 S-A-P-R-E, what's that? It's third person, 3 S singular, A active. Third person singular active, P-R-E, present. Look at sunvatam, which I'm highlighting. 2DM, IPV, 2DM, second person, dual, middle. So sunvatam, you're talking to the two of you, you two, that's the second dual, and it's a middle form. We have, in other languages, just have an active and a passive. Sanskrit has a middle as well, and Pali has remnants of the middle. And that's followed by a space, then a 3-letter abbreviation, sometimes 2 3-letter abbreviations, that's rare. The 3-letter abbreviation, IPV, stands for imperative. There we are. So we know sunvatam is an imperative. You two do such and such. And in vidvishavahai, 1 DM IPV. That's first person dual middle. First person dual that is the first. Dual, that means the two of us, and it's a middle verb. And imperative there. So it's avahai, the we two imperative ending. Ma vidvishavahai, let the two of us not quarrel or dispute. And one final thing before I move on from this sheet is that to mark causative and intensive verbs, there's just a space following the rubric. So if a verb is causative or intensive, then what you'll see is what we've given here. 2PA IPV space C, as in bhavayata, from the root bhu, bhavayata, meaning you're being told to cultivate virtue. You very often see bhavayata, and in Pali, bhaveta, meaning to, it's, this is the second person active, sorry, second plural active, talking to you, but you in the plural, that's three or more, and it's an imperative space C. That means it's a causative verb. So from bhavati is the non-causative, the straight verb. Bhavayati is put into the causative, to cause to be. So here we are, bhavayata. The eagle-eyed among you will notice that I've just corrected. There was a typo. I've written imperative as bhavayata with the th. The imperative is bhavayata with a non-aspirated t. Bhavayata would be the ordinary present tense, the present in indicative tense. But a note here as an aside, whereas the Sanskrit distinguishes between ta and ta, second person plural, straight present indicative, ta, tha, and imperative ta, ta. Pali has tha for both. So the Pali, I'm going to write it for you now, would be bhaveta. So that deals with the sheet describing the inflections and the abbreviations for the inflections and the conventions I've used. What I'll now do is just look at the text. It's my annotated and analyzed text of the Bodhicharyavatara, just to go through some of the conventions that I have used. The conventions that I've used, by the way, are precisely the same for both the Sanskrit and the Pali texts. So although we're looking at a Sanskrit text with the Bodhicharyavatara, everything I say applies equally to the Pali texts that I've annotated, which I've done in precisely the same way. So I'll share the screen again. Get myself out of the way. Now here, this is the same one we were looking at before. As I've explained before, first, second, third boxes and fourth box are all self-evident and self-explanatory. Let me scroll down to something that's good illustration of what I'm about to tell you. Yeah, this one, look, verse 4. This is verse 4, Bodhicharyavatara. You'll see that in where we've got these parallel columns, you've got the Sanskrit in the left and the English, part translation, but mostly explanation on the right. If you look now at the English, you'll see some entries are right up to the margin, to the left margin, like centered out by the defilement trappers, and others are indented. I will explain the meaning of that. If you read down the non-indented ones, you are going to get the full, complete translation in English. Look at this. Scented out by the defilement trappers, you have entered the birth trap. Do you not know, even today / now, you have come in, sorry, you have come into the mouth of death. So reading down the non-indented, that gives you the full sentence. Look now into the left-hand column. The non-indented is the word as it appears in the original text, but often put in the stem form. So in Pali, klesha vagurika grata is klesha vagurika, a klesha which is a trapper. It's equating trappers with to define trappers in people who snare, trap animals, the hunters. So centered out, in Sanskrit goes klesha vagurika grata. I've put it in this form down in the explanation, the same words, but reordered into an English order, so you can see exactly what's meant, centered out by the defilement trappers. So altering the order, just so you can unravel what it means in the Sanskrit. Now, the next non-indented word is Pravishta. The Pravishto, with Sandhi Pravishta, comes Pravishto in certain circumstances. Here it's Pravishto because it's followed by a voiced consonant, Pravishto Janmavaguram, but in its raw nominative form, a word freestanding, is Pravishta, you have entered. So before telling you what that Pravishta is brackets you have entered, I break that down by explaining that the root, the root vish is enter, pravish with this verbal prefix pra. I've explained it doesn't actually alter the meaning. I've given a little bit more explanation. I've explained how the past participle, this is in the stem form, pravishta, is made from pravish with the palatal sh plus th, changing into retroflex sh, retroflex by Santi. So having done this explanation of how we get pravishta from vish, pravish, pravishta, having done that explanation in the indented lines, we now come back to the word as it appears in Sanskrit. Now look down to kim. So here that's indented because before in the phrase kin janasi, do you not know? Before going to that phrase, I've just highlighted kim here, and I'm explaining what it means in this context. Once I've given that explanation, you'll see now back to the actual Sanskrit text. Now that you know what kim means, and I give you kim na janasi, do you not know? And similarly for agata, here, come, the past participle of agam. So I explain before we get to the unindented agata, which is the same form that you see in the Sanskrit text. To get to that point, we go through the explanation, root gum, with verbal noun prefix agam, past participle agata. Okay, now you've got it. Back to what it says in the Sanskrit, agata, which is, of course, the nominative, masculine nominative singular form. So this explains the indentations. I say if you read down all the bits on the English side that are not indented, you will get the whole sentence. Centered out by the defilement trappers, you have entered the birth trap. Do you not know, even today or now, you have come into the mouth of death, and then with the interspersed explanations. And down at the bottom, I just, where these bullet points are, I give a further explanation about what a phrase is, what it means, why it means that. Some additional points on gra. I've broken down these compounds: defilement, trapper, sniffed, equals sniffed out by the trappers. And again, some more syntactical and grammatical explanations, all of which should be self-explanatory as you scroll down. Now, one last point that I'll show you, and I'll do it by just writing on this page, which I'll then delete, is the use of asterisks to indicate an incorrect form or a form that doesn't exist. Say for example, I'm telling you about the verb gum, and that makes its present tense, he, she, or it goes, is gacchati. And I would explain to you that this verb is a bit irregular, because I would say you would expect to see, because there's only I think two verbs in the language, the m changes to a ch in the present tense like that. It's rare and a bit irregular. So I might say to you that you would expect to see a form like gamati. Now, when I write gamati, I'm going to write it with an asterisk, certainly before, sometimes after as well, just to emphasize it. So when you see something written with an asterisk like that, it means that it's an incorrect or a wrong form that doesn't in fact exist, and that I'm putting it there simply for illustrative purposes to show you the difference between what we would have expected, the incorrect, non-existent gamati, where you're warned, don't learn that form because it doesn't exist. You're warned by the asterisks. And just to explain, just to show how the correct form is in fact gacchati. So that is it on this video, and I hope that that will be of some use to all of the students who are and will be with me in the Sanskrit and the Pali classes. Well, thank you for listening.